Now.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is the place writers like to gather, and we talk about all things writing for writers and by writers, and just get us into the groove to inspire us to write more and to learn more about our craft. I am your co-host today, Jean Wise, and I'm joined today by Melissa and Norma, who are going to help run the meeting today. Our friends Bethany is tied up with something on writing-wise, and Johnny's got a sinus headache, so she won't be on today. And so we've invited everybody to stay on today for a discussion on fiction. And of course, we have to start with character and story. So people that are real characters are Melissa and Norma. So we're going to turn it over to them to kind of lead the discussion. And please help participate a little bit today, ask questions or feel free to add, because we kind of threw them into this at the last minute. And so they were willing to kind of come up to the bat and help lead it, because this is not my area of expertise. I'm a nonfiction writer. So we'll turn it over to them, and let's make it a kind of an open mic, helping everybody out today for a discussion on fiction. So take it away, Melissa and Norma. Where do you want to start?
I can get going on story and character, and hopefully have you guys fill in here and there. I like that you talk about us being characters, because obviously I love characters. I'm obsessed with them, and some of you who know me know just how much. In fact, I've been in conversations with family members who hear me talking about my characters, and they say, "You're talking like you are referring to real people." I'm like, well, they are real in my head. Character, for me, it drives the story, and that's one of the things that we want to kind of jump right into right off the bat when our discussion about Fiction 101 is story, because without story, everything else is flat. There's nothing. So today we're going to talk about just the real basic things, the elements that we need to have story. Now, before I just go in and write listing these things, do any of you have any idea about what elements are necessary to form a story? What makes up a story?
Setting, part of the setting, is that what you're thinking about?
Well, that could be one possible thing. Setting.
Setting could be a character too, can it?
Mm-hmm. Character is definitely one of them.
Tension. Conflict.
Yes. Conflict is another one.
Motivation
is one for sure that's in there. That goes a little more into the character aspect, but definitely in there. Mm-hmm. Any other ideas?
Yeah, a trial to overcome.
Yes, a conflict, a trial. Yeah. Okay, so you guys have some great ideas, and they're all in there. They're all sub-elements and some main elements. I'm basically, when I start this out, I'm going to be referencing from a book called Story Engineering by Larry Brooks. And I'll try, as I get into this talk, to get that link into the chat later if you are interested in getting that book. This guy is excellent. I really want to revisit the book again. I've only kind of been over it skimming for the first while, and it's been a while since I've gone over the concepts. But I was first introduced to him studying Randy Inger Mason's classes on fiction, and he swears by Larry and his concepts about elements of story and structure. And the first element that he talks about as being necessary in the story is your concept. Now, when people hear the word concept, I often get it confused with theme. They think the concept, is generally what the story is about. So they'd say, oh, concept is like, let's say, can an immoral person be reformed to do good? And that's actually theme. Theme is the overall thing that the author's trying to push. Could an immoral person be reformed to do something good? Concept is the what if. And in order to get the best concept for your book, you kind of have to ask yourself a series of what ifs in order to convey the theme. So we're trying to ask ourselves, can we reform this immoral person? Well, what if, we'll go through this series, I have a character and a story in mind that I think most everyone is familiar with, and we'll use that as our illustration. So in our series of what ifs, let's say What if he was a pirate? Okay, so we've got this pirate. Well, that's kind of shallow still. What if he's a pirate to reform? Well, so what if he is a pirate who lost his crew's respect? Well, that's something. It still kind of seems weak, isn't it? So maybe we need to ask another what if, because we keep asking these what ifs until we get to this big concept, because it's not strong enough just to say we have a pirate who could be reformed or a pirate who's lost the respect of his crew. So what if said captain not only lost his ship but was marooned by his crew? Anybody kind of guessing where I'm going with this yet?
Oh, yeah.
And then the final what if the pirate captain lost his ship, was marooned by his crew, and knew that the only chance of regaining both was depend on someone who hates pirates? Now there you have a concept, and you have a story that's going to lead to the theme: can an immoral person be reformed to do good? Because he's butting heads with somebody who is against what he stands for, don't you? So there you have concept and theme. And of course, you guessed that theme is the other thing that you need in a story. Without a theme, your stories are flat. They don't really go anywhere. But you have to have the concept to drive your themes. Now, we'll get into character and plot after that. Obviously, those are two important things, because plot develops the structure of your story, how you're going to tell the character's story or to push your themes and your concepts. And I'll get into character.
I've got a question just on your process. Do you
Yes.
come up with this concept and theme before you even write your story? Or have you come up with a character and a plot idea and then go backwards and work to this plot and the story? Which
That
comes
is
first,
something-
chicken or egg?
That is something that depends on whether you are a plotter or a pantser, or if you are a mix between the two. A lot of people, including Larry Brooks, who came up with this story structure, are plotters. And so they prefer to have all of these concepts, themes, characters, and plots planned out before they ever start writing it. And then people like me, I'm actually a plantser. I mix both plotting and pantsing, so I call myself a plantser. Yay, Isabella's with me, so is Norma. So I do a little bit of plotting. If I have some ideas in my head, I jot them down. But a lot of times I'll still want to write ahead and kind of just explore the ideas and see where they take me. And then I will rein them back in with more plotting as I go, if something just is falling flat or not quite working. So that's what I like to do. How about you, Norma? You have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I pretty much like to, like you said, jot down a few ideas. And then as I've shared with some of the Writers Chat Fiction group, as you're doing your story, oftentimes the characters will change what you had planned. And so the first time I had that happen, it was like, what? This really happened? And it was really neat. And that actually happened again last night as I was preparing for today. This part of my story kept rolling around and I'm going, no. And well, guess what? That's going to happen. I'm going to have to kill off one of my characters, and I didn't want to. But anyway, so yeah, I get a few ideas, and then I just get those down, and then I just start writing and see where it takes me.
I'll say, for speaking personally, some of this arises from my own personal passions, conflicts that I have faced, conflicts that friends or relatives of mine have faced, conflicts in the Bible for me as a Christian writer. And my romance started from, I got the idea while I was teaching a retreat out of the Song of Solomon. And the whole idea of this love story, and the heroine in Song of Solomon has trouble believing that the king really loves her. And so that was the concept that launched me in direction for my whole novel. And it just kind of tumbles around back in there, but I have to write about what I know and what I'm passionate about.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that that makes the deepest stories and the deepest characters when you can draw from something that really matters to you as a writer, and the things, the lessons that you're learning, the personal lessons that God brings in your life, or that family or other things that just are really meaningful to you. And like they say it with developing characters, not only but with thought, that what brings tears to the author will bring tears to the reader. So if there's no emotion in the author, your readers aren't going to feel anything. So, so we talked about the story needs concept, character, theme, and plot. But we also need certain elements to drive the execution of the story. So not only do you need the structural elements of the story, but you also need things that help move it forward. And those two elements are scene and voice, the writer's voice. Now, the scene is probably obvious. It's basically like a plot within the plot. And I don't know if you're going to talk about scene a little bit too, Norma, or yeah. So I will leave a lot of that for Norma to discuss. But basically, it's like the subplots within the plot to help it all come together. And you're playing it out almost like a movie in your head. And so we'll jump right to voice, which, you know, writer's voice is basically how you write.
Today.
A lot of people think that there's something magical and mystical about coming up with your writer's voice, and you've just got to explore the depths of your soul, and you know, they think there's something so elaborate about it, but really it is how you write, how you come across. You do not have to be a poet to have a writer's voice. The biggest things, and Larry Brooks addresses this a lot, is that you need to be able to be compelling and entertaining and professional when you write. That those are the most important elements. And if you're focusing on that, making that compelling story and entertaining your readers, and you're not so much into the stylistic flourishes, although those are good too, just in moderation, you'll find that your voice starts to come out. The more you write, the more you develop your voice as a writer. And everybody's voice is unique because everybody is unique. So any thoughts on voice? Any of you, your experiences?
Find it right away. I think you kind of said you have to write to discover it. And I've often said, as a nonfiction writer, I discovered more of my writer's voice by blogging. I originally started blogging, I think 3-4 times a week. Now I only do once a week, but that helped hone in to what was what was me. So it helped me find that what was authentic is one word I use with voice.
Absolutely.
So the process of writing helps you discover it.
Mm-hmm. I think another exercise, oh, Norma, were you about to say something?
Well, I was going to say, and voice is typically is noticed throughout all the works of that author.
Mm-hmm.
The voice isn't just per piece that they're working on, per story. Typically, you see or you read that voice, whether they've written fiction, nonfiction for young readers. It should be pretty consistent across the genres.
Definitely. I agree. And you oftentimes learn more about an author's voice the more you read their work. So you might get an intro with one, but you aren't seeing all the facets.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Leslie's made an interesting observation in the chat, because she said she tends to be more serious and set in historical and accented when she writes.
Mm-hmm.
But she's not so serious in person, but she grew up reading historical novels, so that may be why. And I think really do, if you find a type of style of writing that you really like, that those earlier authors are a big influence on you.
Definitely, and that was what I was going to address too, is that, believe it or not, you actually can study to find your voice, because that's what it is you're exploring what speaks to you. You think about all of your favorite authors or your favorite stories that you've ever read, and you go in and you think about all the things that they do that just inspire you, and you'll notice that they influence your own voice, that they in essence, start to kind of come out when you're writing in your own work.
I always say you read some of your favorite authors as a writer, not as a reader.
Definitely.
You might read it first as a reader, but then you go back and reread it. Why is it that touched your heart? Why is it that just brought you there? What is she or he doing that possibly you would adapt in your own way under your own voice? So
absolutely, and that's a technique that a lot of teachers and authors will encourage other writers to do, is to go back and take your favorite authors and actually study their works, go to specific scenes or look at specific characters that inspire you and see how they put them together, how they played them out on the page, and break it down, see how you can work that yourself and learn from those concepts.
One thing I've found that's helped me distill my voice is flash fiction, and even these little 50-word, 100-word word prompts. I've learned to cut out a lot of the extraneous words, and what it does is it distills my voice. It doesn't change my voice, but what you said, it's what speaks to you. That is what it is, because I think this is changing my voice, it's changing my style, but it wasn't doing that, it was distilling it.
Definitely, because you have to really think about how to make it succinct, don't you? Rhonda brought up a question in the chat. That one really makes you think. What adjectives describe voice? How would any of you describe your own voice? That one really does make me think. That might be a fun exercise for us to work on and come back and share in a group. I had never sat and really explored to say what my own voice is. I can sit and think about my fiction and think about the themes that are always running through it and what really matters to me, and that can kind of affect my voice. I know that for me, one of my biggest themes that is always running through my works is redemption. And so that does tend to be a serious, but it also tends to be a very compassionate and emotionally driven subject that comes out that way. And a lot of my characters and my stories are somewhat serious and emotionally driven, and there is moments of compassion and that come through. And so I guess you could say that those come out in your voice. Other thoughts?
Isabel was right. It's not a quick, easy answer.
It isn't.
That's right.
It really makes you think. And gosh, I don't know. I know a lot of my writing is about encouragement and not giving into fear. And so I'm not 100% sure how that all plays out in my voice, but I know I had submitted to Rachel Colby and a couple of my other writer friends, I think Melissa was one of them, to critique something I had written. And Rachel wrote back, where's your voice? This isn't your voice. This doesn't sound like you. Where are you in this? And so I retweaked it by giving a little more example, because this was a nonfiction piece. And she goes, Rachel's response back after that was, there you are. There's your voice. Now I'd have to go back and look at that piece to know exactly what she meant, because I haven't really thought about it a whole lot till right now. So, but other people recognize your voice maybe quicker than you do, and they know when what you're writing isn't feeling authentic.
When we talk about things like my voice is encouraging, or my voice is contemplative, or whatever, I think those are more thematic. Like I have a character that encourages someone, but I have struggled with this because I know I participated as a judge in a contest, and one of the questions was, does the writer have an authentic voice? And I'm like, I have no idea. This is an area, that everybody says is important to find your voice, and I'm like, well, I just kind of write. And maybe that's not the best thing, but it is, I know when I don't like something I've written. And I think that's part of it. But, I really struggle with this whole idea of voice, because I'm like, I just talk. I don't really think about it.
Well, I think you touched on something there too, and it's a concept that I really wanted to push in this lesson today, is that all these things really stem from each element, that each one plays off of each other. You talked about things being thematic, but really theme is so very important to our voice because, you know, the best example I could think of is James Rupert, who talks about authors needing to find the theme of their life before they can really press forward with the rest of their writing, their platform, all of it. The theme of your life is so important because that's what your characters, your story all comes from. And so if you think about themes that are important to you, that are pushed in your story, well, then everything is going to start stemming from that, including your voice, because that drives your passions. And so I think that you could play with that. You could play with your themes, you could play with your concept, your characters, fleshing out each of those, and then you begin to discover your voice and see how it connects to all of those things.
I participated in the Serious Writer webinar on branding last week, and I was just trying to sort it out, and I actually came up with something, and it was like, I always try to say things in other words. I always try to write. What motivates me to write is to expound on a truth in other words, so that and those are my stories, but my stories always, not always, but usually take place also in other worlds. And so I thought, there's a brand in other worlds. But I think that making truth graspable, is that like a voice?
I think
I
so.
mean, because I'm always trying to interpret stuff.
It's exploration, exploring the depths of
With
truth.
curiosity, curious voice, maybe.
Yeah.
On that, I'm intrigued by what Rhonda said about, because we're all kind of tending towards themes, in, like, I think Sophia hit a good thing, a brand, and where Norma wants to be like our heart, but is that quite the adjectives? I think there's a gap there yet. I think Rhonda's hit something on there I think we all have to work on. I know we don't want to spend the whole time on this, but I really think that might be a challenge for each of us as we leave today. And
I'll give a, excuse me, Jane. I'll give a brief example. Most of you know that I am writing 15th century Scottish historical romance, and that just flows. Before a contest one time, I wrote a Western, and I tell you, girls, I felt lost. It was just, it's like my voice doesn't come out in Western. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I think there are certain elements of me as a person that just expresses myself more easily in certain environments than others. I've not written a word of anything contemporary because there's something in my voice that appeals to me, and you know what? I got nowhere in that contest with that Western piece. Nowhere. And I knew it wasn't me when I sent it in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, is this kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about voice?
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think that
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt you, but yeah, I was just saying, I agree. I think that comes right back to who you are as a person and what the theme of your life is too. Like, and that got me thinking, Rhonda, listening to you.
Knock it off.
Same here. I mean, I come from Wyoming, and people automatically will stereotype, well, you must write Westerns or about the Old West and all of that stuff. And I'm like, well, I know a lot of stories about it, but that really isn't what drives me. I've always been a romantic, obsessed with the Middle Ages and medieval and knights and chivalry and ancient. And so all those words come to my mind, and those inspire me. And so thinking back into the past, as you explore all the things that you love, the things that drive you, that are your passions, those adjectives naturally just kind of start coming out, and you realize, yeah, that comes in my voice more, and I speak more from the depths of myself when I'm writing about what I'm passionate about versus something that's forced like a Western.
Rachel had a good point in the chat, because she said the reader's looking for you on the page. even all the work, even the fictional characters should have a little of us in them, speaking, showing the message through them, even the bad guys. So I think that's intriguing. Woo.
Yeah. It's
We
scary.
all have a dark side, don't we?
And it is scary to explore your dark sides. You're like, that come from me? I don't like this character.
That's a great point. But back to like Rhonda's question as we struggle with this. I'm wondering if, again, if we go back and look at the authors that influenced us, maybe even read their bios, their longer bios or the shorter bios, and see what adjectives they use might help us at least start narrowing down adjectives that we feel is at least where we are, where we want to be. I don't know. That might be another idea.
I think this would be a great future writers chat topic.
Just all
Uh,
voice.
Discovering your voice,
So
because you need a voice whether you write nonfiction or fiction.
yeah.
So I think that'd be a great topic for in the future.
Definitely.
I think
Maybe
your
one
voice,
of us will remember that.
I
Rod-
think maybe voice describes more how you tell than what you tell.
Yeah.
You can be light, you can be a heavy writer, you can be a realistic writer, you can be a very fantastical writer, you can be a writer who takes this one truth and you might say it this way and someone else says it completely differently, but it's the same truth. So I don't think it's the content, I think it's the how, what describes you. I mean, like what I write is real, because telling the truth in love is one of the spiritual gifts that God is developing in my life right now. And that comes across in my blogs, it comes across in my devotionals, it comes across in my nonfiction and in my fiction characters. So I feel like it's more the how than the what.
Definitely. Good insight.
Very good.
Yes, we need to explore this concept more in the future, don't we?
We'll bring it back. Mhm.
Okay, so moving on to character, we've discussed about everything that story needs to move forward. So let's start digging a little deeper, and I'll get us started on character, and then we'll move to normal with plot, and try to keep this simple, but yet still let you come away with something to explore more of. And I want to start out my talk by letting you know that I do have a sample character sketch template that I am going to share with the group for all of you who would like to have a template to work from. And I'm willing to show you these on a screen share if you'd like. Just want to give you warning ahead of time. And I will emphasize this through the talk. You do not have to go as in-depth as I do, because I am obsessed with character. You don't have to plan it out as much as I do. You can make your character sketches as simple or as complex as you desire. Okay, so when we create characters, we want these dynamic characters that drive our story, that they're three-dimensional, that we can invest in, that just speak to our emotions, that we can connect to and relate to. That's what we want from character, right? Right? You think about the stories that you write, or not write, read, write too, but read, thinking about stories that you've read that have inspired you. The characters are something that just kind of jumps out of the page at you, and they pull you in, and you're like, yes, I feel that way, or I felt that way, or I can relate. And that's what really pulls us in. And so we want to develop characters that are three-dimensional, that drive us emotionally and invest us in the story and make us want to follow them all the way to the end to see what happens. Yes, Leslie talked in the chat about really fleshing out the characters before you write, and I am one of those who has to flesh out my characters before I can really get into the depths. I can get started on a story if I have a concept of the character, but it's not going to be evocative, it's not going to speak unless I flesh out those characters. So to have good characters, you have to start out with the basics. Every character has basics that they must have, and then there are extra elements that are needed to add depth to those characters. So we're going to talk about the basics first. There are 4 basic things that characters have to have in order to develop a story around them. They have to have ambitions. They have to have goals. They have to have motivations, and they need conflict. If you have none of those things, you have nothing for the character. The character is flat. So what do we mean by when we talk about all of these concepts? I'm getting ahead of myself. I just realized that. Well, we're going to drive a little deeper with different elements after the basic elements. I'm going to touch in on those basic elements first, but just to tell you that the extra elements that we need that drive deeper are going to be personality traits, inner values, mannerisms, and backstory. We'll get to those later. So we're going to focus right now on the main elements. Ambitions. What are ambitions for your story character? Well, the ambitions oftentimes get confused with goals and sometimes with inner values, but they all spur off of one another, and they are a little separate. Ambitions are the abstract desires of your characters. What does she want? What does she want to be? What does she want to do? What are her ambitions? Now, earlier when I was talking about plot, I mentioned a character reformed, and we're talking about a pirate. So obviously, who was I talking about? Somebody chime in. Nobody knows?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
The example you gave at the beginning?
Yes, who is
Jack Sparrow.
Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so here we have our character, Jack Sparrow. What is Jack's ambition? What does he want? Well, you might think, because we were talking about plot, that he wants his ship, but that is not his ambition. Jack's ambition is to become an infamous pirate. He wants to be known. He wants to be famous. He wants people to know him. I'm Jack Sparrow. So,
He wants to be feared.
yes, feared. Positively the most fierce pirates in the Spanish Main. So this is Jack Sparrow. That's his ambition. He wants to be famous. So we know what he wants. That's his ultimate ambition. But what are his goals? How are goals different? Well, goals are the concrete objectives that your character needs to obtain their obtain their ambition. So while he wants to be this famous pirate, he needs to have goals to get him towards that ambition. And for Jack, the obvious goal is he's got to get his ship back and a crew. He needs his ship, he needs his crew, because without them, he can't be famous, he can't be respected. They're all gone. So
He's not much of a pirate without those.
Yes, he isn't. In fact, you see in the very beginning of the movie when he's showed up with this sinking little rowboat, and people are asking him, or are they thinking that when he's caught, they said, "You are positively the worst pirate I've ever heard of." And he's like, "But you have heard of me." You know, he's totally focusing on fame, but he's not making a good first impression because he has nothing. You'll find as we explore the character further that that's all part of the depths of him and what creates the story. So then we go into, I got to get my notes organized. Motivation. So we've figured out Jack's ambitions. We've figured out his goals. What motivates him? What drives your character? What pushes them towards the goal, the ambition? We've kind of touched on it already. Jack thinks that without his ship, without his crew, he's going to not be able to attain the fame he wants. Well, what motivates him is not as much the fame as falling into obscurity. He does not want to fall into obscurity. He wants to be known. And without those things, he'll just become another rum-drunk wastrel. Nobody will know him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And Melissa, doesn't that often come from perhaps their past?
yes.
Something that's happened in their past, belittled, told they'll never be anything, trauma, all those things.
Yep, and we're going to explore into that too. Any thoughts before we jump into any further ones? Ready to move on. Okay, so we've discovered that he doesn't want to fall into obscurity. He's motivated to try to attain fame by getting back the things that are lost to him. We've established that he's lost his ship, his crew. He's marooned with nothing but his wits to save him. So that naturally brings us to the conflict of the story, doesn't it? We know his goals, we know his motivation, we know his ambitions. But what stands in the way of those things? Well, that's what conflict is. What prevents your character from getting what he wants, from attaining the ambitions, from meeting his goals? And the more conflict, the more story you have. We know not only does Jack not have his ship and his crew, but we learn later on that the crew threw him off, and then the crew becomes cursed. So now, in order to get that ship back, he's got to figure out how to break the curse. And the only way he can break the curse is by depending on a man who hates pirates. So now you have your conflict, you have your motivation, your ambitions, your goals. But if you were to stop there, if you were to say, okay, I have enough to go with my story, I can write, you have a problem because your characters are still flat. What drives all those things? If you were to just stick with your goals, your motivations, your conflict, your ambitions, you still risk having a two-dimensional character who's not only flat, but dare I say, stereotypical. So we then need to drive deeper to personality traits, inner values, mannerisms, and backstory. The first one and the most fun, I think, is personality traits. Those are the things that make the character who they are. The motivations are often driven from the character's personality traits, because you want to know what drives them. How do they see themselves as a person? How do other people see them? And how do they view maybe how other people see them, and that affects how they act. Then we go into inner values, and that gets down to the heart of the matter. What is most important to your character? And that's going to drive their personality too. So like what's the theme of their life? We talked about that with the plot. You have to kind of figure that out for your character. What is the theme that drives them? What is most important to them? The reason for their existence, at least in their mind's eye. Norma, what you had mentioned, that was it inner value or was it personality traits that you were reflecting back to with motivation? Oh, you mentioned backstory. I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I?
Yeah, I had mentioned backstory, that it was, something from their past that drove Jack Sparrow to desire what he desired.
Okay, so we'll be getting to that then. Mannerisms. Okay, I bet everybody can point out some mannerisms for this particular character, because that is one of the strongest things that drives and makes us remember him the best. Mannerisms are specific tics, physical actions, and gut responses that are often born of their traits, their inner values, and their backstory, things that happen to them in their life that made them who they are and make them act out in ways that they do. What's something that Jack Sparrow does that everybody notices? Don't everyone chime in all at once.
Sorry, we were answering our response. Patricia was asking, who is Jack Sparrow?
I think the physical mannerism that made me just like wonder who is this guy was what I would call his swagger.
Mm-hmm.
Anything he does, his gestures and everything, it's all overblown, overdone. Even his walk, he doesn't walk like anybody else. And I think some of that is what Johnny Depp brought to the character, because, he just saw the character on the page. And this is what makes an actor a really wonderful actor, is when they can read a character on the page, envision and then act out some of these physical mannerisms and habits. There are characters that are, I don't like Johnny Depp. I have never liked the movie he was in until I saw him in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Definitely. And that's it. It's almost overblown in this case. And not all characters are going to be to the extremes, but I chose an extreme character to make things a little easier to understand. But he walks with a stagger, almost like he's a drunkard all the time. You're wondering if there's ever a point where he's sober. because he's all over the place. He slurs his speech and is always saying "savvy," and you're like, what? The characters that are all around him, the supporting cast, are even wondering, is this guy sane? Is he with us mentally, or is he way off in left field? There's even a point in the story where the character Will Turner, that hates pirates and ends up helping him, asks and wonders, is this madness or brilliance? And Jack Sparrow tells him, you'd be surprised how often those two concepts coincide. And so you're often wondering, and they keep you wondering through the story, is this guy insane or is he brilliant? Do all these things just naturally fall from dumb luck, or is he orchestrating everything to make it happen? And that's what really drives you and intrigues you and makes you wonder about this character, about his backstory, which is what we come to. What happened to them in their life to make them the person that they are? And you really don't even learn all of this character's backstory until you progress into the rest of the movies. So you only get piecemeal of it. And I think that that's something that's very important as writers too, that we need to remember. A lot of times people want to info dump the backstory to get everything across, but then you risk boring your readers and they don't want to be invested. So you have to give them the backstory piecemeal, just enough to kind of entice them, to entertain, to compel. Like we talked before, oh, this person experienced this traumatic life event, or there is some traumatic life event that happened to him that made him this way, but we don't know the full story and we want to know. So you just feed them just enough to have them turning the page, making them wonder what happened to this character. So how do you think you would develop backstory? What would be something that you could do to develop backstory on personality, inner values, mannerisms?
One thing I
Dialogue.
have, go ahead, Mary Ruth.
Using dialogue. I mean, like in my current work, I use dialogue to sort of sprinkle in the backstory.
Awesome. Yes, dialogue is definitely an effective trait. I'm sorry, my brain. An effective technique to use. Rhonda, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, sometimes I have a character do something unexpected. You think they're going a certain way, and then they'll do something that surprises everyone. And the reason for that surprise is usually in their backstory.
Yes, awesome. So these are techniques that you can employ while working out a story, while fleshing. And a lot of times as pantsers, we'll do that too. We'll start writing out dialogue or scenes and throw in the surprise, and that helps us discover it. For those who are plotters, we like to go in a little in depth to develop these things. And so we do things like character sketches and character interviews. And that's what we do to develop the character's backstory, inner values, mannerisms, all of the things that develop a fully rounded character. Now, a lot of people, when they do a character sketch, like to start out with the technique of interviewing their character. They'll pretend in their mind's eye they've set them on a seat and they're asking them all the questions about them. It doesn't go with just the physical appearance, height, hair color, face, skin tone, all of those things. We explore so much deeper when we do a character sketch. So we often ask them key questions to flesh them out. Now, would you guys like to see a character sketch? Would you like me to share one with you just to get some of the creative juices flowing?
Yes.
Yeah, why not?
Yes. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. It's been a while since I've screen shared, so bear with me if there's a few little technical hiccups in the process. Okay, can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, this is just a basic template of a character sketch, and everybody does them differently. So don't feel that you have to be caged into this format. This is just my preferred format. And I like to break it down into topics to help me organize things. And for those of you who've been in previous writer chats where I've talked about research and formation of things, I like headers. I absolutely love headers because they help me keep myself organized. So you'll find that everything in this template has a header over here to help you organize it. And I like to break down a character sketch by my protagonists, my antagonists. I do secondary characters, and then something that maybe not everybody does, but I sure do, is tertiary characters, which are mentioned in name only or serve as glorified props. So when you do a character sketch, you have the obvious things. You have your character's name, and then you might even want to put things like their goals, their motivations. You can even do more than what I've done here. I kind of mix mine all throughout. I like to ask them when they were born, what age they are in the story. I'll incorporate the current age, height, physical build. You can do whatever you want. But then I get down to personality designations. And one thing I love, and we've talked about it before, is to do character deals like more Myers-Briggs or Enneagram to test your characters. Some of you may not have heard of that, and I apologize, I don't have the chat up. If anybody's asking questions, somebody might need to.
Basically, those are personality profile tests.
Yes, personality profile
So
test.
there's lots of different ones out there, but it just kind of helps you develop a deeper character, because those tests show both the strengths and weaknesses of that personality.
Yep. And if you do a personality designation on your character, you test them out and go to these sites. And we can share some of these sites with you in the chat afterwards. They can often help you flesh out some of these other questions that you might ask. They can help you to decide your character's sense of humor, the type of sense of humor, their basic nature, ambitions. We talked about that. It can help you to do that, their philosophy or their theme of their life. So then you can get further in, you can talk about their hobbies, ask them what they like to do, how they dress, their favorite colors. You can see I get a little bit elaborate. Educational background, work experience, friends, enemies, family, why. You can even ask the why these people are the way they are. Love interest if applicable. Description of their homes. How do they see themselves? How are they seen by others? Strongest character traits, weakest character traits, their deepest fears, present problems, how will it get worse? These are questions you can ask yourself even through the story and go back and add to your character sketches. And the most important thing that you need to know, and you can flesh out a backstory. So this is just one example. I don't know if I have to reshare or if I can pop something up and you can see. Let me just do something real quick. Did that change the screen for you? Are you seeing a full-fleshed character sketch now? You aren't? You're still seeing the old one?
Yes, the old one.
Okay, let me stop screen share then, and I will come back in to give you an example of how I fill out one of these. There we go. And I'm not going to go into deep into this. I'm just going to give you an example of what one fleshed out looks like. Now, again, you do not need to have as many characters as I have. I don't know if you see this, but I'm like Tolkien. I love characters and I have huge casts. Now you'll see here that each of them are organized alphabetically too, and that's one nice thing about headers. When you have a header, then you can go and you can highlight your topic and list them, and they will suddenly come up over there. And so you can go back as you're writing and you can go to your specific characters and see if you're staying true to them. And that's one thing I love about it. So I can go and I can take you to my character, Nessa, and you'll see a complete write-up of her nature, her backstory, all the things that make her tick. I have long character lists, pages upon pages for each character. You do not have to get that in depth, but I need that in order to flesh my characters. So, and even fleshing out your antagonists. And I want to encourage people to consider too that if you have a strong antagonist, you have a stronger story too, because your antagonists should consider themselves to be the hero of the story.
Yep.
So you want to try to flesh them out just as well as you do your protagonists. It's our habit as writers to want to focus on our heroes or heroines, but don't forsake those supporting casts and those villains, because that helps make a rounder story. All right, so have I overwhelmed you with character planning?
No, this has been great.
Any
This has been-
questions?
Somebody have a quick question?
I do. I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. In your character development, is there any place where you list how a character is going to be changing? Because I know they've got to change through the story, but is that just in your head, or do you put that as part of your character development?
I put it as part of my character development, how character changes in the story. So Randy Ingerman said he talks about it too. Some people like to put in the characters' paradoxes as well as their goals, their motivations, their flaws, and then how they'll change, how they will develop. So you can list everything, their conflict, how they're going to change. And that's oftentimes how you can spot flaws in a character too. If something isn't resonating, maybe you're not staying true to the progression, the natural progression of that character's change, or who they are, what their inner core values are. Yeah, I would definitely put it in your sketch. And a lot of people like to add images to their sketches too. That's something I didn't do there. I do images elsewhere, but they like to have a physical representation of their character. If they don't quite have a clear picture in their mind of what their character looks like, a lot of people take pictures of maybe celebrities who inspired their characters, or different characters from other stories that inspired them. And you can go off of those. So you can get like a picture, an image of someone, and then flesh out their physical character from that, and think about maybe the aspects of that actor or actress that inspired your character, and use those to develop your character as well.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. It's 5 till. And so thank you, Melissa. That was awesome. That was really good. I was worried about not having enough material to cover my portion, and this worked out perfectly. So great information. I love the detail of your character sketch. I think that's important, and that helps when the more we know about our characters, I think the easier it is to write about them and to bring out their personality in the story, instead of having to stop and go back and try to figure out, well, what would they do here? But if you already know their personality type, it's going to be easier to flow with that character in the story. And so the last thing we want to talk about today, did you have anything else, Melissa, before I go on?
No, I think we should press on with plot.
The last portion for today is plot, and I'll just give you a couple of quotes about plot. Plot is also called storyline. It's the plan, the scheme, or the main story of a literary, dramatic work, such as a play, novel, or short story. That's according to dictionary.com. Plot is the byproduct of the pursuit, not the precursor to the pursuit. That quote's by Stephen James. Our plot is the story idea. That quote is by Diane Mills. Plot is a series of events that keep your characters together until the issues are resolved at the end of your book. And that quote is by Cheryl St. John. Basically, plot is what is your story. That plot is what moves your character from sequence of events in a way that's full of emotion, tension, and conflict. And to get to these places, you have to know the desire, and we've already covered some of these, so I'm just going to hit them real quick. You have to know your character's desire. What is it your protagonist wants more than anything else? What is it they want? What are the obstacles to what they want? Okay, with Jack Sparrow, he wants to be famous. What are the obstacles? Well, right now he doesn't have his ship. He doesn't have all these things. Some of those obstacles are internal. how that character thinks about themselves. And a lot of that depends on backstory. Then you have your inciting incident. And this is the inciting, the crisis or the call to action. This is where something happens. Either they're informed of a tragedy, they get a phone call, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a phone call from a previous lover who stirs the pot because she is already interested in this guy, and here's somebody from the past comes. And like the old song says, she's torn between two lovers. Sometimes it can be a crisis, the inciting incident, or it could be something great that's a blessing that turns out to be a curse in disguise. So the inciting incident is the catalyst that gets your character off the couch and into action, gets him out of his mundane everyday life. The inciting incident should be something that absolutely turns your character's world upside down, and it doesn't have a I just lost my train of thought. It doesn't have a quick remedy. He or she cannot fix this problem quickly. And often they can't fix it alone. And so the inciting incident, basically, if it's a tragedy, it's something that has just, to use a cliche, the rug's been yanked out from underneath them. And they're struggling to get back on their feet, to get back to that state of balance. But then the next part of it is after your inciting incident, then you have to have your conflict and tension, which is all the things that happen that make it hard for your character. Imagine somebody tripping over a rug and falling. Okay, well, there's other things that are going to happen before they can stand straight back up. They go to reach on the table and the table topples over. All these different things happen to keep your character from getting back to normal, because he's going to try to get back to that normal state that he knew before the crisis, before the inciting incident. And with that, we want to be careful about just stacking a whole bunch of conflict for conflict's sake, because readers get bored with that. As I was studying this, I thought about, I like action movies. I'm okay with some guy movies, guy flicks, instead of chick flicks. But anyway, there's one I was watching with my husband, and the chase scene just went on and on and on. Like, they could have done this chase scene in about a minute and I'd have been happy. So, the same as in our books. If we just keep drawing out the conflict and it's not doing anything to our character, the reader gets bored. How many of you have been to a movie and you walk out and you say, that movie had no plot? Or you read a book and it's like, I'm not sure what the plot, the moral of the story, what the main character was trying to accomplish. He just went from action to action to action, but never changed. So the whole point of all this, and many of you have seen the arcs, or where, you can plot out your book, or it looks like a mountain. One side goes real steep and then the other part only comes down part way and then it levels out. Any of those are great tools. The first three elements I mentioned, the desire, the obstacles, and the inciting incident, those three should take up about a quarter of your book. Then the next portion should take up 2/4. It sounds weird to say that. You should say half. It is half. But anyway, should take up, imagine that your book is cut into quarters. The first quarter is those first three elements. The next two sections are all going to be the conflict, tension, and emotion of your book. And then the last quarter is going to be the resolution of your book. What was it that your character was able to dig deep down and find to be able to not give up when it felt like everything was hopeless? We want to get our characters to the point where everything feels hopeless. And what are they going to do? Are they going to sink or are they going to swim? Where are they going to get, how are they going to find the wherewithal from within to make it to the top of that mountain? And that's what's going to drive your story. But you have to have the emotion with it. And it has to also, you have to show how it's slowly changing your character on the inside and making them a different person. So that's really kind of plot in a very fast nutshell. Any comments, questions?
I think you covered it really well. I'm trying to look through the chat to see if we've got some.
Sophia, you were shaking your finger. You're muted. Were you going to say something? Oh, it was your thumb. Okay. I'll tell you, when we first started out doing this, I was super nervous because I haven't finished my story and I'm not an accomplished writer yet. Mm-hmm. And so, but oftentimes we learn the most when we teach, right? But I'm going to show you real quick some of the resources I use for this today. Troubleshooting Your Novel by Stephen St. James. No, sorry, by Stephen James. I'm getting my names mixed up. Getting into Character, Brandolyn Collins. The Dance of Character and Plot by Diane Mills. And Ready, Set, Novel. This is a great, if you're one that especially is a planner, this has, in this book, now see I'm flipping pages and there's none. In each section, she gives you how to absolutely flesh out each component of the plot for your character, for your protagonist, your antagonist, and any secondary characters. And then the other one, other reference I used was Writing with Conflict and Emotion by Cheryl St. John. And so these all have great ideas, and we just got to get busy and write and not be afraid. Like me. So anyway, so that's really the nutshell. I had pages and pages of not pages and pages, but I had plenty of things to say. One thing that Stephen James, I don't know why I keep wanting to call him St. James, Stephen James said that I think is really important to know. Tension is born when conflict meets desire. So therefore the conflict has a purpose and it's not just empty conflict. So there we have it. There's the basics of Fiction 101.
Thank you.
So I think with that we can, what is our program for next week, Melissa? Do you know?
Yes, I do. So again, thank you everyone for coming and joining us in this Fiction 101 presentation and being our supportive cast in it. Next week, we are going to talk about Camp Nano. And I believe we actually even have Lisa or Leslie.
Leslie's here, yeah.
Lisa. Mm-hmm. Leslie in the chat with us today. She's going to be presenting about Camp Nano. There she is. And we're going to discuss it. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about it, Leslie?
Yeah, basically it's just going to be an overview of Camp Nano and how it works and why to do it and how to use it, especially I think for fiction. I think it works better for fiction than it does for nonfiction, just because you have to get into your characters and you have to get into the free flow writing and not focus so much on editing, which is what really helped me and get all my 2 novels that I'm working on, now starting the 3rd. Has really helped me get a majority of my writing done, because you're not writing alone, there's groups and there's challenges. So we'll be able to cover all that next week.
Awesome. And we look forward to that. So
I have a question.
Go ahead, Kelly.
My question is, where do you see the recording of this? It's being recorded.
we will have it posted in the Writers Chat group after we get it uploaded to YouTube, and you can also find it as well as other Writers Chats and Serious Writers YouTube channel.
Okay.
So we'll have that up for you hopefully by this afternoon, or even in early evening, I guess, for you guys. My time zone is a little different from everybody else's. So again, thank you everyone for joining us on this week's Writers Chat, and we look forward to seeing you next time. We'll talk to you then. Bye.
Bye.